Welcome to this web development course. Over the next several sessions, we're going to take a complete journey, starting from the very basics of HTML all the way through to building real, fully functional web applications using Laravel. Whether you're a complete beginner or just getting started, this course is designed to meet you where you are. The instructor for this course covers all web and IT-related topics, both physical and online classes. The Laravel and web development portion is handled directly by him. So for this class, you'll be learning from someone who is deeply involved in both the teaching and the practical side of building web projects.
To give you a sense of where this course leads, let's look at some real student work. A senior student, Nauraj Acharya, about 3 batches ahead of the current class, built an entire portfolio using skills from this very course. The projects you see in that portfolio were all created by him, and some were even built during his time in a similar class.
Specifically, 2 of those projects were built right during the course itself, not over months of extra practice, but as part of the learning process. This gives you a realistic picture of what's achievable by the time you finish. By the end of this course, you'll be building exactly these types of websites, a news portal and a multi-vendor e-commerce platform. These aren't toy projects. They're normal, real-world websites that cover all the key concepts you'll need as a web developer. These are your 2 main projects. The news portal is the first, and the multi-vendor e-commerce platform is the second. Both are designed to be practical learning vehicles, not just finished products, but tools for covering every major topic in the curriculum. The first project is a news portal website. Now, the goal here isn't to build something massive right away. It's a normal, functional website, but it's carefully designed to cover all the foundational topics. As the instructor builds it with you, he'll be introducing concepts like database relationships, SEO, cookies, and sessions along the way. Think of the news portal as a vehicle for learning. Every feature you add, articles, categories, user sessions, brings in a new concept. By the time it's done, you'll have touched on database design, search engine optimization, and how cookies and sessions manage user state. All of that gets woven into one project. The second project is a multi-vendor e-commerce platform, and this one is more complex. It has 3 distinct roles: an admin who manages everything from a central dashboard, vendors who can set up their own stores, and customers who browse and shop. The instructor actually built a version of this for the batch just 1 step ahead of this class. Each role in the platform has its own set of permissions and views. The admin controls everything. Vendors manage their own inventory and orders. Customers interact with the storefront. Building a system like this teaches you about role-based access, relational data, and real-world application architecture. Here's how the course is structured. Everything starts with HTML, the very foundation of the web. From there, you move through web design, then into JavaScript, but only the parts relevant to Laravel. The main destination is Laravel itself, which is a full-stack framework, and the journey ends with building and deploying your projects. Laravel is the core of this entire course. Everything you learned before it, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, is preparation. The instructor is very deliberate about this. You won't go off on tangents learning things that aren't relevant to Laravel. Every topic is chosen because it supports your ability to work with Laravel effectively. So why Laravel? Because it's a full-stack framework, meaning it handles both the front end and the back end. You don't need a separate front-end framework for this course. Laravel's Blade templating handles the views, Eloquent handles the database, and the framework takes care of routing, authentication, and more. It's a complete solution. The course runs for approximately 1.5 months. Saturdays are not counted as class days, so the actual schedule is based on the video content. The instructor's goal is to cover as many topics as possible within that window, and if new or extra topics come up in the future, additional videos will be provided to fill those gaps. This is an important point. The learning doesn't stop when the scheduled sessions end. If relevant topics emerge that weren't part of the original plan, the instructor commits to providing extra video content, so you're not left hanging if the curriculum needs to grow. A student asked a great question. Can a beginner realistically learn everything in 1.5 months? The honest answer is, by the end of the course, you'll have solid knowledge of what you're capable of doing. You won't be a master, but you'll know the path. Experience comes with practice over time, and the course gives you the foundation and the support to keep growing. One thing worth highlighting is that hosting is part of the curriculum. You won't just build websites locally on your computer, you'll learn how to put them alive on the internet. By the end of the course, you'll understand the full pipeline from writing code to deploying it for the world to see. Now, what do you actually need to know before starting? Very little. The instructor is explicit about this. If you can open File Explorer, find a file or folder, and understand what a file path looks like, that's enough. Everything else, from installation to writing your first line of code, will be taught from the ground up. Specifically, understanding file paths is the one practical skill that helps from day one. When you're working with code, you'll constantly be referencing where files live on your computer. If you can look at a path like C:\users\projects and understand what it means, you have all the prerequisite knowledge you need. A student also asked whether AI coding tools and AI support would be covered in the course. The answer is yes, but strategically. The approach is to learn the basics first, understand how things actually work, and then introduce AI tools toward the end. This way, you use AI as a helper, not a crutch, because you already understand what's happening under the hood. Now, let's talk about how users actually navigate between pages, not by typing code directly, but by clicking links on the page itself. The idea is simple. When someone clicks a link on the home page, they should land on the About page, and vice versa. This is the kind of navigation every real website needs. To create a link in HTML, we use the anchor tag, written as the letter A. This tag has two important parts: the href attribute, which defines where the link should take the user, and the inner HTML, which is the visible text the user actually sees and clicks on. So href handles the internal routing, and inner HTML handles the display.
So for the About page link, the href value would be /about, which is the internal path to that page. And the inner HTML, the clickable text, would say something like "Go to About page." When the user clicks it, the browser navigates to that path and loads the About page.
Once you have the link from Home to About, you also need the return link, from About back to Home. On the About page, you add another anchor tag, this time with href set to just a /, which points to the root or home page. The inner HTML would say Home. Now both pages are connected to each other. And this is what it looks like in the browser. You click About on the home page, you land on the About page. You click Home on the About page, you're back. This is the foundation of multi-page navigation, and you can keep adding more pages by repeating this exact pattern. 3 pages, 4 pages, it all works the same way.
Now, let's talk about the div tag. In HTML, when you need to group multiple elements together to keep things organized and aligned, you use a div. Think of HTML as the structure of a building. Just like a room has walls, lights, and furniture all arranged neatly, a web page has sections that need to be grouped and structured properly. The div tag acts as a container. It doesn't display anything on its own, but it groups related content together so you can style and position them as a unit. When building a full homepage with many sections, you'd wrap each section in its own div, keeping the structure clean, organized, and easy to manage. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. What exactly is web development? Web development refers to building websites and web applications. When we say web development, we're talking about everything from what the user sees in their browser all the way to the server and database running behind the scenes. For now, though, the focus is on the website side, specifically the front end. Right now, the focus is purely on the front end, the part of the website that the user actually sees and interacts with. The back end and APIs are important too, but those come later. First things first, understand what the user sees and how it gets there. Here's a great analogy to understand front end versus back end. Imagine a restaurant. When a customer walks in, they see the dining hall, the tables, chairs, the menu, everything neatly arranged. That visible, interactive space is the front end. The customer doesn't see the kitchen, but the kitchen is where everything gets prepared. That's the back end. Now, how does the customer get to a specific part of the restaurant? Through a path, a staircase. In web terms, that path is the URL or link. Just like a restaurant might have a ground floor, a second floor, and a third floor, each accessible by different staircases, a website has different pages, each accessible by different URLs. So how does a web page actually load? Here's the flow. When you click a link or type a URL, your browser sends a request to a server. The server holds the code for that page. It sends back a copy of that code to your browser. That code is in HTML format. And then your browser reads that HTML and renders it as the visual page you see on screen. The key insight here is that every single page on a website corresponds to one HTML file on the server. Each URL maps to a specific piece of code. When you navigate to a different page, the URL changes, and the server sends a different HTML file. You can verify this yourself by right-clicking any web page and selecting View Page Source. You'll see raw HTML.
This is why HTML is the very first thing you learn in web development. Every page a user sees is delivered as HTML. It is the structural foundation of every web page, like the walls and rooms of a building. Before you can style anything with CSS or add behavior with JavaScript, you need to understand how to build the structure with HTML. There are two ways to build a web page: writing all the code yourself from scratch or starting from a pre-built template. Both approaches are valid, and a good developer should know both. Writing from scratch gives you full control and deep understanding. Using templates saves time and is very common in real-world projects, especially for things like admin panels or dashboards. The teaching philosophy here is clear. First, build everything yourself so you truly understand how it works. Once you have that foundation, learning to work with templates becomes much easier because you know what the template is actually doing under the hood. Templates are tools, and tools are only useful if you understand the craft. A common question at this stage is, will we be learning a JavaScript framework? The answer is yes, but at the right time. The curriculum follows a structured path, and JavaScript frameworks will be introduced when the foundational topics are complete. The syllabus is also not a hard ceiling. Additional topics beyond what's listed will be covered as the course progresses. Now, let's talk about HTML page structure, and the instructor uses a really intuitive analogy here. Think of building a room in a house. When you build a room, you don't just throw everything in randomly. Lights go in one place, switches in another, doors and windows each have their own designated spots. HTML structure works the same way. Just like a well-designed room has every element in its proper place, a well-structured HTML page has every piece of content organized inside the right tags. Without structure, it's like dumping all the furniture into a room and walking away. Technically, it's all there, but it's a mess. The instructor makes a really important point here. You can arrange things in a room, but if you just leave them sitting there without any organizing framework, it's still chaotic. The same is true in HTML. You might write all your tags correctly, but without a proper structure wrapping them, the document lacks organization and meaning. Structure in HTML isn't just about aesthetics. It's about making your code organized, readable, and maintainable. When you or someone else comes back to edit the page later, a well-structured document makes it immediately clear what belongs where. So how do we actually create this structure? The instructor demonstrates using the div tag. When you need to keep two or more elements together, say a heading and a paragraph that belong to the same section, you cut them out and place them inside a div. Think of a div as a box that groups related content together. The div tag is essentially a container, a box. It has no visual appearance by default, but it gives you a logical grouping that you can then style with CSS or manipulate with JavaScript. Whenever the instructor says, put it in a div, think, put it in a box. Once you start nesting elements inside divs, your code can get a bit crooked and hard to read. The instructor mentions a very useful shortcut, Shift plus Alt plus F in VS Code. This automatically formats your entire document, fixing indentation and alignment in one keystroke. The instructor admits it's become muscle memory for them. Proper indentation is critical when working with nested HTML. Each level of nesting should be indented one step further in. The indentation lines, what a student in the class called darkas or vertical lines, visually show you which elements are inside which container. This makes debugging and reading your code much, much easier. A student in the class asked a great question. What do those vertical lines in the code editor mean? The instructor explains, the outermost line belongs to the body tag. The next line in belongs to the first div inside the body. Each nested element gets its own indentation level, visually showing the parent-child relationship between tags. Every opening tag has a matching closing tag, and the indentation lines connect them visually. When you see two lines, it means there are two levels of nesting. The body contains a div, and that div contains another div, like boxes inside boxes. This nested structure is the foundation of every HTML document you'll ever write. The instructor briefly addresses a student question about the student portal. Notes and course materials are available there. The instructor has uploaded PDFs, so students can download them directly from the portal. Once downloaded, you can print them, annotate them, or use them however works best for your studying. This is a practical point worth noting. The student portal is your go-to resource for course materials. If the instructor has uploaded a PDF version of the notes, you don't need to copy everything down manually. Download it, and you have a permanent reference you can revisit anytime. A student asks whether what they're learning is full-stack development. The instructor confirms, yes. Full-stack means both front-end and back-end. The Codite website itself is built using Laravel, the same framework students will be learning. So everything from the user-facing pages to the admin panel to the API layer is covered in this course. For the front end, they won't be writing plain HTML and CSS forever. They'll move into Laravel's Blade templating system, which is essentially HTML with some extra Laravel-specific syntax. It still compiles down to HTML, so the foundation you're building right now is directly applicable. Students are understandably worried about how much PHP they need to learn. The instructor is very clear. You do not need to learn core PHP to use Laravel. Laravel is a PHP framework, yes, but it abstracts away most of the raw PHP. You'll learn just enough JavaScript and PHP concepts as they become relevant to running Laravel.
Inside Laravel, you'll work with Eloquent ORM for database interactions, models and migrations for managing your data structure, Blade templates for your views, and Tailwind CSS for styling. Each of these tools is designed to be approachable, and you'll learn them progressively as the course moves forward.
On the styling side, the instructor mentions 2 CSS frameworks. Bootstrap uses pre-built component templates. You pick a template and customize it. Tailwind CSS, which is what this course will use, is utility first. You build designs by composing small utility classes directly in your HTML. The course will primarily use Tailwind.
A student asks about running 2 versions of XAMPP on the same machine. The instructor strongly advises against it. The reason is port conflicts. Both versions try to use the same port, and that causes problems across all your projects. The recommended approach is to rename your old XAMPP folder to something like XAMPP Old and install the new version fresh.
Students worry about losing their old database data when switching XAMPP versions. The instructor reassures them. Don't worry about it right now. When the course reaches the Laravel section, the instructor will specifically show how to bring over old databases. For now, just rename the old folder and install the new version cleanly.
The instructor wraps up with a foundational principle that's worth internalizing right now. HTML's job is purely structural. It defines what content exists and how it's organized. HTML does not handle colors, fonts, spacing, or visual design. All of that is CSS's responsibility. This separation of concerns is a core principle of web development. When you write HTML, you're answering the question, what is this content and how is it organized? When you write CSS, you're answering, how should this content look? Keeping these 2 concerns separate makes your code cleaner, easier to maintain, and much easier to debug. This is a principle you'll carry through your entire web development career. Moving on to hosting, one of the most practical questions students ask is how their Laravel projects will actually be deployed. The instructor clarifies that hosting will be taught as part of the course, and rather than relying on free hosting platforms, the focus will be on cPanel-based hosting, which is a paid but professional solution. cPanel is not a company name. It's a hosting control panel interface that is primarily associated with PHP-based environments. Since Laravel is a PHP framework, cPanel is a natural fit. The instructor strongly recommends it over free hosting alternatives, mainly because you get your own domain name and full control over your environment. Here's a really useful insight. You only need to buy one domain. Under that single domain, you can create as many subdomains as you want, and each subdomain can host a completely separate project. So if you purchase one domain, you can host your portfolio, your full-stack project, and other work all under that one purchase. An important point the instructor makes is that different frameworks require different hosting environments. It's not one size fits all. Laravel and WordPress, both being PHP-based, work well with cPanel, but frameworks like Django or Node.js need their own dedicated server environments. So the hosting solution always depends on the technology stack you're using. The key takeaway here is that cPanel is particularly well-suited for PHP-based projects. Both Laravel and WordPress can be hosted through cPanel. However, the instructor points out that not every hosting provider includes cPanel. Some platforms, like certain cloud services or specialized hosts, may not offer it, so always check before committing to a hosting plan. Now, let's talk about storage. The instructor shares from personal experience, hosting around 20 different projects on a single plan, and the total storage consumed was only about 5 gigabytes. That's remarkably small. The reason is that pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files are extremely lightweight. Text-based code simply doesn't take up much space. The situation changes when you start building full-stack applications. If your project involves a database and users are uploading images or videos, the storage requirements grow considerably. In those cases, you'd need to purchase additional disk space on top of your base plan. The instructor notes this is not an immediate concern for current projects, but something to plan for as complexity increases.
So the practical rule is straightforward. If your project is purely code with no user-generated media, your storage footprint stays tiny. But the moment you introduce file uploads, video content, or large datasets into a database, you'll need to scale up your storage plan and pay a bit more. The instructor reassures students that for current course projects, this extra cost won't be necessary.
The instructor acknowledges that free hosting options do exist for Laravel projects. There are quite a few of them out there. However, the key reason cPanel is recommended is that it hasn't been personally tested with all those free platforms, and reliability matters. With cPanel, you get your own domain name, which looks professional and gives you full ownership of your hosted work.
The instructor's stance is clear. Go with cPanel if you can afford it. It's not expensive, and the benefits far outweigh the cost. You're not just hosting a project, you're building a professional presence. Having your own domain name means your portfolio and projects reflect your personal brand, which matters a lot when you're looking for jobs or freelance work. A student asks a very common and practical question. Are the current live sessions being recorded? The instructor confirms yes, all sessions are recorded, and the recordings are uploaded directly to the student portal. So if you miss a class, fall behind, or need to review something, you can go back and watch at your own pace. The instructor also points out that the WhatsApp group is available for questions at any time. This is important because when you're watching a recorded video and get stuck, you don't have to wait for the next live session. You can ask in the group immediately. The combination of recorded videos and an active support group is designed to make sure no student gets left behind. The instructor makes a thoughtful point here. It's not realistic to follow along perfectly during a live session, especially when concepts are being demonstrated in real time. Downloads might be slow, setup might take longer than expected. That's exactly why recorded videos are provided, so you can go through the material at your own pace, pause when needed, and actually practice properly. Shifting to a CSS fundamentals discussion, the instructor explains the fundamental division of responsibility in web development. HTML is responsible purely for structure. It defines what elements exist on the page. CSS, on the other hand, handles all the visual design, colors, spacing, fonts, layout, and everything you see aesthetically. You cannot do meaningful design work with HTML alone. The mechanism through which CSS applies design to HTML is through properties. A CSS property is a specific instruction, like color, font size, margin, or padding, that tells the browser how to render a particular element. Every visual change you make to a web page is the result of one or more CSS properties being applied. Understanding properties is foundational to everything in front-end development. The instructor touches on the CSS gap property, which controls spacing between elements in flex or grid layouts. The instructor notes that in earlier times, achieving gaps between elements required creating separate CSS classes and manually adding margins or padding. The gap property simplifies this enormously. One property handles the spacing between all child elements in a container. This before and after comparison illustrates why the gap property was such a welcome addition to CSS. Previously, developers had to add margin properties to individual elements and handle edge cases, like removing the margin from the last item in a row. With gap, you define the spacing once at the container level and it applies uniformly. It's cleaner, more maintainable, and less error-prone. A student asks about how senior developers tackle complex problems, specifically about logic building skills. The instructor gives a very honest and encouraging answer. This ability is not something you can be directly taught in a classroom. It develops naturally through experience. When you face enough real problems, your brain starts recognizing patterns and generating solutions almost automatically. The instructor describes a personal habit. When facing a complex problem, they mentally simulate the entire flow from start to finish before writing a single line of code. This mental modeling is a skill that separates experienced developers from beginners. You imagine the data moving through the system, anticipate where things could go wrong, and plan your solution holistically. This comes with practice and exposure to diverse problems. The reassuring message here is that you don't need to have all the answers right now. Logic building is a cumulative skill. Each problem you encounter and work through, even if it takes you a long time, adds to your mental library of patterns and solutions. Over time, what once felt impossible starts to feel obvious. Trust the process and keep solving problems. Picking up where we left off, let's talk about who's leading this course. The instructor is Sudham Shrestha, a full-stack developer at Code.IT. At Code.IT, he oversees all web-related development work. Every website, every web project goes through him. He handles both physical and online classes, and for this Laravel course specifically, he's the one taking you through every session. What's important to understand is that this isn't a passive role. He's actively involved across both formats of teaching. Whether you're attending in person or joining online, the instruction and support come from the same source, which means consistency throughout the entire course. The course runs for 1.5 months. A common question is whether that's enough time to fully learn everything, and the honest answer is nuanced. The instructor's goal is to expose you to the full breadth of knowledge within this duration. You'll see what you're capable of building with Laravel, and all of that will be demonstrated to you directly. Here's the key expectation to set. Not everyone will cover every single topic during the live sessions, and that's completely fine. Everything is recorded, so fast learners can move ahead while others can revisit sessions at their own pace. The WhatsApp support group remains active throughout, so you're never stuck without help. One of the most reassuring aspects of this course is lifetime access to the recorded videos. Once you enroll, the video library is yours indefinitely. This is especially valuable because the course covers a large amount of material. Some students even repeat the course if they feel they missed something the first time around, and that's fully supported. The instructor specifically mentioned that some older students returned to repeat the course. Perhaps they felt they only grasped part of it the first time. That's not just allowed, it's encouraged. The combination of lifetime video access and ongoing WhatsApp support creates a safety net that lets you learn at whatever pace works for you. Now let's look at what you'll actually build in this course. The flagship project is a multi-vendor e-commerce platform. Think of it like a marketplace. There's an admin who controls everything at the top level, vendors, called dokane or shopkeepers, who register and sell products, and customers who browse and purchase. All three roles interact within the same system. The admin is the platform owner. From the admin panel, you can manage everything: vendor registrations, product listings, orders across the entire platform. When a new shopkeeper wants to join, they send a registration request, and the admin reviews and approves it. Only after approval can the vendors start adding their products. The vendor side is equally important. Once approved by the admin, a shopkeeper gets their own dashboard, where they can add products, manage inventory, and handle orders specific to their store. This separation of responsibilities, admin versus vendor, is a core architectural pattern you'll learn to implement in Laravel. The e-commerce platform includes several real-world features. For authentication, you'll implement login with Google, a modern OAuth flow, alongside standard email and password login. On the payment side, the platform supports cash on delivery as a baseline, and Kalti, a popular Nepali digital wallet, is also integrated as an option, depending on the store setup. What's interesting about the payment configuration is that it's vendor-specific. One store might only support cash on delivery, while another might have Kalti enabled. This reflects how real-world multi-vendor platforms work. Each seller can have their own setup. You'll learn how to architect this flexibility directly into the system. Order management is a critical feature of any e-commerce system, and you'll build it from scratch. When a customer places an order, it appears in the vendor's dashboard with a pending status. The vendor then reviews and processes it. Importantly, orders are organized by store, so a vendor only sees orders relevant to their own shop, not the entire platform's orders. This store-by-store order isolation is an important design decision. It means the system needs to correctly filter and route orders to the right vendor. You'll implement this logic in Laravel using relationships and authorization, ensuring that a vendor can only access what belongs to their store, which is also a security consideration. The course targets building 2 complete complex web projects within the 1.5-month duration. That is an ambitious goal. The instructor is upfront about this. Building a multi-vendor e-commerce system alone is a significant undertaking. The expectation isn't that every student will finish both projects during the live sessions, but rather that you'll have all the resources needed to complete them. The honest framing here is important. If you can't complete everything in 1.5 months, that's not a failure. It's expected. What matters is that the instructional videos, the code references, and the support channel are all there for you. You complete the projects at your own pace, and help is always available when you hit a wall. Beyond the technical skills, the instructor shares a career-building strategy that's genuinely practical. As you learn, you should be actively building your LinkedIn presence. LinkedIn is described as the Facebook for developers. It's where professional opportunities actually happen. The advice is to start posting daily updates about what you're learning, even if the projects are small. The posting strategy is simple but powerful. Take screenshots of what you build each day, write a short post about what you learned or accomplished, and share it consistently. The content doesn't need to be impressive. Even small wins documented daily build a visible track record. Over 1.5 months, you'd have a substantial portfolio of posts showing your growth journey. Here's the logic behind the LinkedIn strategy. When you post consistently, your connections see your work. More importantly, their connections also see it. LinkedIn's algorithm extends your reach beyond your immediate network. Over time, people start recognizing you as someone who builds things. When they need a developer, they remember you and reach out directly. Compare this to the traditional approach of applying to freelancing platforms directly. On those platforms, you're competing with hundreds of other developers, and without a track record, it's very hard to stand out. But if a client has already seen 30 days of your posts showing real work, you've already proven yourself before the conversation even starts. That's the advantage of building in public. The instructor adds one more layer to the strategy, tagging Code IT in your posts. When you tag the institution, the post becomes visible to Code IT's entire network of connections, which is significantly larger than a new student's personal network. This means your early posts get much more visibility than they would organically, accelerating the process of being noticed by potential clients. Let's be clear about the full technical scope of this course. It covers web development, meaning the visible, browser-facing side of applications, as well as back-end API development. This is genuinely full-stack territory. A company's web presence is just one piece. The APIs that power mobile apps, third-party integrations, and dynamic data all live on the back end, and you'll be building both sides. Web development in this context means the actual pages users interact with, the storefront, the vendor dashboard, the admin panel. The back-end API side means the logic underneath, how data is stored and retrieved, how authentication works, how orders are processed. Together, these two layers form a complete application, and mastering both is what makes you a full-stack developer. Continuing from where we left off, let's talk about the support structure that comes with this course. One of the most reassuring things here is that the WhatsApp support group is available to you for a lifetime. It's not just a temporary thing. Even after you finish the course, that community stays with you. And this applies to the video content as well. Once you enroll, you have lifetime access to all the recorded videos. So if something doesn't click the first time, you can always come back and rewatch. In fact, students from previous batches are welcome to repeat the class. If something felt unclear before, you can revisit it and build on that foundation. A very natural question that comes up is, what if I have absolutely no background in IT? What if I'm just enthusiastic but don't know anything yet? The honest answer is that this course is designed precisely for that kind of learner. The instructor addresses this directly and reassures students that no prior knowledge is assumed. The course takes you from the very beginning, from installation, all the way through to building complete, fully functional websites. The path is structured so that even someone who has never touched code before can follow along step by step. The goal is to make the journey feel manageable, not overwhelming. The course kicks off right from the installation process. Nothing is assumed to already be set up on your machine. This is important because a lot of beginners get stuck even before writing their first line of code. They don't know what tools to install or how to configure them. By starting here, the course removes that barrier entirely. There's a thoughtful approach to AI tools in this course. Rather than jumping straight into AI-assisted coding, the instructor deliberately holds off on introducing AI until you've built a solid foundation. The reasoning is clear. If you don't understand the basics, AI output will just confuse you. Once you know how things work manually, then AI becomes a powerful accelerator. This is actually a really sound pedagogical approach. Learning to code without AI first means you can read and understand what AI generates later. You won't be blindly copying output you don't understand. You'll be able to verify, modify, and build on it, which is the real skill employers and clients care about. To show what's actually achievable, the instructor points to real projects built by past students from the same course, just earlier batches. These aren't demo projects built by the instructor. They were created by learners who sat in this exact class before you. One example highlighted is Nawaraj Acharya, who is roughly 3 batches ahead of the current students. He took the same course, went through the same material, and then built out a complete website project. And it wasn't built in a day or two. It reflects real effort and learning over time. This gives current students a concrete, realistic target to aim for. Now let's get into actual HTML, specifically the anchor tag. The anchor tag is how we create links in a web page. The instructor uses a really intuitive analogy here. Think of an anchor on a ship. It hooks onto something and doesn't let go. Similarly, an anchor tag grabs a URL, and when clicked, it takes you exactly to that destination. The key attribute inside an anchor tag is the href attribute, short for hypertext reference. This is where you put the destination. When a user clicks the link, the browser reads the href value and navigates there. Without href, the tag exists but goes nowhere. So the href is essentially the address you're anchoring to. To demonstrate how anchor tags work in practice, the instructor sets up two separate HTML pages, an index.html file as the home page and an about.html file as the about page. This is a foundational concept in web development. Most websites aren't a single page, they're a collection of linked pages that the user navigates between. Each page is set up with a simple H1 heading to identify it. This is home page, and this is about page, along with some placeholder paragraph text generated using the lorem ipsum shortcut. This gives each page some visible content, so you can clearly tell them apart when previewing in the browser. It's a clean, minimal setup that keeps the focus on learning the linking concept. The instructor also shares a handy productivity shortcut while working in the code editor. Instead of clicking and dragging to select a large block of text, which can be imprecise, you can click at the starting point, then hold Shift and click at the ending point. Everything in between gets selected instantly.
You can also use Shift with the arrow keys to extend or shrink the selection character by character or line by line. This is especially useful when you want precise control without reaching for the mouse. These small workflow shortcuts add up. The faster you can navigate and edit code, the more productive your development sessions become.
Here's the core use case the instructor is building toward. On the home page, you place an anchor tag that links to the About page. When a visitor clicks that link, the browser navigates from index.html to about.html. This is the fundamental mechanism behind every navigation menu, every hyperlink, and every multi-page website on the internet. The structure is straightforward. The href attribute holds the file name of the destination, in this case, about.html. The text between the opening and closing anchor tags is what the user actually sees and clicks, so you control both where it goes and what it says. This two-part structure, href for destination, inner text for label, is something you'll use constantly in web development. The instructor raises an important practical point here. Yes, you could right-click a file and open it directly with LiveServer, but that's not how real users experience a website. Real users land on a homepage and navigate from there. So as a developer, you need to think from the user's perspective. They should be able to get anywhere from the homepage using links. This is a mindset shift that separates thinking like a file manager from thinking like a web developer. A website is a connected experience. Every page should be reachable through navigation, not by someone manually typing a file path. Anchor tags are what make that connected experience possible, and that's exactly why they're one of the first HTML elements taught in any serious web development course. Picking up right where we left off, let's dig deeper into how HTML actually works and how you set up your development environment to start writing real web pages. This is the foundation everything else builds on, so it's worth understanding clearly. Here's the core idea. When you click a link, that link calls a server. The server responds by sending back a copy of some code, and that code is HTML. Your browser reads that HTML and renders it into the page you actually see. So HTML is literally the thing that arrives from the server and becomes your web page. And here's the key insight. Every single page on a website corresponds to its own HTML file. The home page has a home HTML file. The About page has its own. The Courses page has its own. Put all those HTML files together and you get a complete multi-page website. So learning to build a website really means learning to build one page at a time. Now, to write HTML, you need somewhere to write it. That place is called a code editor. There are many code editors out there, some paid, some free. But the one that's most widely used, especially for beginners, and is completely free, is VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Think of it as your writing desk for all things web development. Getting VS Code is straightforward. Open any browser, search for VS Code, and the official site comes up right at the top. Click Download for Windows, and it downloads. But here's an important distinction. Downloading and installing are two separate things. Downloading is like bringing groceries home from the store. Installing is actually cooking the meal. You still need to run the installer. During installation, you'll see a list of additional options with checkboxes. Make sure you tick all 4, especially the first one. That first checkbox is what lets you right-click any folder and open it directly in VS Code. Without it, you'd have to go through a longer process every time. If you already have VS Code installed, reinstall it just to make sure these boxes are checked. Rather than writing code directly and randomly, professionals always work inside a project folder. Create a folder somewhere on your computer. It can be inside a classes folder or anywhere you like. Give your project a name, like Web. Then right-click that folder and choose Open with Code. That opens your entire project inside VS Code, ready to go. A quick but important concept. Folders are just containers. They hold files or other folders. A file is where actual information lives. And the file extension, the part after the dot, tells the computer what type of file it is. A .jpg is an image, a .pdf is a document, and a .html file is an HTML file. So when you create a new file in VS Code, you must name it with the .html extension, so the system knows what it is. By convention, the very first page of any website, the home page, should always be named index.html. When someone visits your site's main URL without specifying a page, the server automatically looks for index.html. So name your homepage file index.html. It's a professional standard worth following from day one. VS Code by itself is like a brand new bike. Functional, but you can add accessories. Extensions are extra features you install to make your workflow better. Two essential ones to install right now. First, Material Icon Theme, which gives your files beautiful, recognizable icons. Second, Live Server, which is critical. It lets you preview your HTML in the browser as you write it. After installing Material Icon Theme, VS Code will ask if you want to set it as your default icon theme. Click Yes, that's what activates it. If you skip that step, nothing changes visually. For Live Server, once installed, you'll see a Go Live button appear at the very bottom of your VS Code window. That button is your gateway to previewing your work. When you click Go Live, Live Server gives you a local link, something like localhost:5500. This is called a local host address, meaning it's hosted only on your own device. Nobody else can open that link on their computer. It's just for you to preview your work. This is different from a real hosted website that anyone on the internet can visit. Live Server is your personal preview environment. You never start an HTML file by just typing freely. Every HTML file begins with what's called a boilerplate, a standard template that sets up the basic structure. In VS Code, just type an exclamation mark and press Enter. If the suggestion doesn't appear automatically, press Control-Space to bring it up, then hit Enter. The boilerplate appears instantly, giving you a proper HTML foundation to build on. The boilerplate has two main sections. The head section handles internal settings, things like the page title that appears on the Browser tab, links to style sheets, and metadata. Visitors don't see this content directly. The body section is where everything visible goes. Your text, images, headings, buttons. Think of it like a restaurant. The kitchen and storage are the head, and the dining area where customers sit is the body. Everything in HTML is written using tags. A tag is a label that tells the browser what kind of content it's dealing with. Most tags come in pairs, an opening tag and a closing tag, with your content sandwiched in between. That content in the middle is called the inner HTML. The browser reads the tag, processes the content accordingly, and displays it on screen. For titles and headings, HTML gives you 6 levels, H1 through H6. H1 is the largest and most prominent, H6 is the smallest. But here's what's crucial to understand. You don't choose heading levels based on how big you want the text to look. You choose based on priority. H1 is for the most important heading on the page, H2 for the next level down, and so on. A critical rule, use only one H1 per page. That H1 tells search engines and users what the entire page is about. On a homepage for a coding platform, the platform name or main tagline gets H1. Section titles, like Our Courses, gets H2. Individual course names inside that section gets H3. It's like a company hierarchy. CEO at the top, then managers, then team members. Structure matters for SEO. For regular body text, descriptions, explanations, any block of readable content, you use the paragraph tag, written as just the letter P. Wrap your text between the opening and closing P tags, and it renders as a clean paragraph. A useful trick in VS Code: if you need a long block of placeholder text for testing, type lorem followed by a number, like lorem 1000. Press Control-Space, hit Enter, and you instantly get that many words of random filler text. Here's a handy shortcut to know. Alt-Z toggles word wrap in VS Code. When you have a long paragraph, it can stretch off screen and require horizontal scrolling, which is annoying. Press Alt-Z and the text wraps to fit your screen width. Press it again and it goes back. It doesn't change your code at all. It's just a display preference to make editing easier.
Most HTML tags have an opening and closing tag, with content in between. But there's a second type called void elements, tags that have no closing tag and no inner HTML at all. The image tag is the classic example. You can't type an image. Images need to be loaded from a source. So void elements work differently. Instead of putting content between tags, you pass information through something called properties or attributes.
The image tag uses attributes to work. The most important one is src, short for source, which holds the URL or file path of the image you want to display. To get an image URL, right-click any image online and choose Copy Image Address, then paste that into the src attribute. The browser fetches that image and displays it. The second attribute is alt, alternate text, which describes what the image shows. The alt attribute serves two important purposes. First, if the image link ever breaks or fails to load, the alt text appears in its place, so users still understand what was supposed to be there. Second, and this is the bigger reason, alt text is read by search engines and screen readers. It helps with SEO, search engine optimization, which we'll explore in depth later. For now, always write meaningful alt text for every image. One more extension worth installing right away, Auto Rename Tag. In HTML, your opening and closing tags must always match. If you have h1 opening, you need h1 closing. If you change one, you have to manually change the other. Auto Rename Tag fixes this. When you edit the opening tag, the closing tag updates automatically. It's a small thing that saves a surprising amount of time and prevents errors. Here's the big picture takeaway for HTML. Its job is to define structure, not appearance. HTML tells the browser what things are. This is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is an image. It doesn't control colors, fonts, or layout. That's what CSS is for, which comes next. Think of HTML as the skeleton of your page, the bones that hold everything in place before you add skin and clothes on top. So here's an important concept around domain management. When you purchase a single domain with a hosting plan, in this case for around 4,000 rupees per year, you don't just get one website. You actually get the domain name itself, plus a cPanel control panel, and the ability to host multiple sites under that one plan. That's a really powerful value proposition. For example, under one hosting account, you can have subdomains like balance.sudamhub.com or host entirely separate projects. One of the examples shown is koseliexpress.com, a Kathmandu-based company, also hosted under the same single hosting plan. So one purchase, many websites. Now, a natural question that comes up is, what about storage? The instructor points out that even with many projects hosted, students' work, client sites, demo projects, the total storage consumed is surprisingly small, staying within the 5 GB range included in that same 4,000 rupee yearly plan, so storage is rarely a bottleneck at this level. Let's shift to HTML. The instructor is very clear about one thing. HTML has one main job, and that is to define the structure of a web page. It tells the browser what content goes where the header is, where the navigation sits, where the main content lives. That's it. HTML is about structure and content placement, nothing more. And this is a point worth emphasizing. Coloring, sizing text, making things bold or thin, spacing, none of that is HTML's responsibility. Students often try to style things in HTML and wonder why it feels wrong. The instructor draws a clear line. HTML handles structure, CSS handles design. Keep them separate in your mind from the very beginning. One of the specific HTML tags introduced here is the anchor tag, written as just the letter A in HTML. Its job is to create links. The instructor uses a great analogy. Think of an anchor on a boat. It grabs hold and doesn't let go. Similarly, when you click an anchor tag link, it grabs you and pulls you directly to the destination URL. That's exactly what hyperlinks do. Looking at the tag more closely, the anchor tag has an attribute called href, which stands for hypertext reference. That's where you put the URL you want to send the user to. The text you place between the opening and closing anchor tags is what actually appears on the page as the clickable link. Simple, but foundational to how the entire web works. The final concept covered here is about full-stack development. A student asks whether the course is back-end focused or full-stack. The instructor clarifies, it's full stack, meaning you learn both front-end and back-end. Full stack means you can build every layer of an application, the user interface, the server logic, and the data layer, all of it. The instructor gives a concrete example. The Code IT website itself was built using this exact full stack approach with Laravel and Blade. It has a public-facing front-end that visitors see and a separate admin panel for managing content. both built as part of the same full-stack project. This shows students that the skills they're learning have immediate real-world application. And the instructor also points out flexibility. If you only need to build the backend, you can build just an API, a set of endpoints that return data, which any front-end can consume. Whether it's a mobile app, a React front-end, or a third-party service, your API serves them all. So full-stack knowledge also gives you the option to specialize in API development alone. To wrap up this section, 3 ideas to carry forward. First, a single hosting plan gives you the power to host multiple websites and subdomains, making it cost-effective for real projects. Second, HTML's only job is structure. Never confuse it with styling, which belongs to CSS. And third, full-stack development means you own the entire application, from what users see, to the logic running behind the scenes, to the data being served through APIs. These aren't isolated topics. They all come together when you build something real.